Welcome to another episode of the Destination Linux podcast.
Welcome to episode 92 of Destination Linux. This podcast is a podcast of opinions made up of three allegedly semi-intelligent people discussing our passion for Linux. Although this time, we're replacing one of the three with someone who might be more intelligent than the rest of us.
I'm pretty sure.
I'm Michael, your host this week, and with me today is Ryan. How are you doing this week?
I'm doing awesome.
Nice. And Gabriele from TechPills. How are you doing?
I'm doing great.
So did I get that correct, the pronunciation?
Yep.
There we go.
Good. Very good.
All right, so Gab, thanks for joining us. He's subbing in for Zeb this week. Zeb isn't feeling well, so we basically last minute, and Gab was really gracious to help out with that. So again, thank you very much for that. For those who don't know, Gabriele is a creator of the amazing TechPills YouTube channel, and where you can find him discussing about Linux and hardware. He's basically another Ryan, but an Italian version.
A better version of me. Let's be honest.
You said it. Anyway, so you can find doing like information videos and reviews and things like that, as well as sometimes occasionally joining us on some Ballistic Overkill, where he totally destroys Ryan. And so anyway, Gab, tell us and our viewers about about yourself and how you got into Linux.
Yeah, thank you, Michael. So I'm going to tell you something about myself. So first of all, I am a computer science student. I have always been passionate about technology, and I started using Linux. I started off as a Mac user when I was young. But funnily enough, what brought me to Linux was macOS itself, because I started exploring like the Unixiness of macOS, and I found out that basically the underlying thing was kind of the same as this other thing called Linux that I've been hearing about. So I actually started dual booting on my 2009 MacBook. And from then it went like basically the next PC I bought was a custom PC, a desktop PC, and I installed Linux right away on it. And
what was the first distro you went with?
Actually, it was a very ancient version of Linux Mint. Back in the day, it was I chose Linux Mint because it came with like all the codecs pre-installed, and it had like this pre-interface on top of the Ubuntu implementation of GNOME 2. Then I went straight to Ubuntu 10.10, I think it was.
That was a really good one.
And yeah. It was very nice back in the day. And then from Ubuntu, I tried some different stuff. I basically had my times with distro hopping. I went from Ubuntu to I tried Fedora, but I didn't really like it very much ever.
Boo.
Got it.
It's just not for me. But anyway, I tried basically all of them. I mean, OpenSUSE, even CentOS, Debian. But at the end of the day, for a very long time, I got stuck with Ubuntu GNOME, and then I just installed on Tergos, and that brought me to Arch, and now I'm Arch all the way.
Wow, I can't believe you didn't say you use Arch first. That's what's amazing.
Right? That's Ryan was trying to give an example a couple episodes ago. That's what you're supposed to do.
You're supposed to tell people you use Arch the first thing that comes out of your mouth. That's like a requirement for using Arch.
Sorry. I'm sorry. I'm really sorry, by the way I use Arch. No, really.
Well done. You redeemed yourself. So we've also done a collab video together on your TechPills channel. We did that on the AMD versus NVIDIA discussion, you being an NVIDIA user at the time currently, and me being a Vega user. And we had a good discussion on that, so you can check that out as well. So you've got really great content out there that we love. So thanks for agreeing to co-host with us, man.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Yeah. So speaking of things that we've been doing this week, Ryan, how you been doing? And you said, like we were talking about earlier, you mentioned you were doing something really interesting with something from Mozilla.
Yeah. In fact, I love this because you didn't even know it existed and you know everything about them. So that was shocking. But I am starting to shoot some new videos on home automation using the Raspberry Pi. So the Raspberry Pi is going to be the base. And I started looking for home automation solutions. And there's a ton out there, right? There's a ton. And I ran across one that I wasn't familiar with, and it caught my eye due to the simplicity of it and just having really good documentation for setup, and somebody I've not dabbled in this area a lot before. And that was Mozilla Internet of Things. So Mozilla Internet of Things is basically the Mozilla Foundation's answer to having the ability to set up home automation via the Raspberry Pi and be able to interface with things that use Z-Wave, or I think the other one is ZB, or one of the other basic signal types that you can use for these different devices. So I have the Raspberry Pi set up with Mozilla as the gateway. I have the Z-Wave Z-Stick on its way here today. And then I have some devices that I'm going to connect to it. And I'm going to shoot the video and we'll see how it is. I don't know if it will be good, bad, or indifferent. It is definitely in the beta, and Mozilla IoT is looking for people to help contribute to this project. But based on some of the screenshots and the GUIs and things, it looks like a very easy way to set up home automation through a GUI tool, and we're going to see how well it works.
Yeah, it looks like a really cool project, and I'm like kind of disappointed in myself that I didn't know what it was before. When you asked me, it was like, have you ever heard of the Mozilla Internet of Things? Like, you could put Mozilla stuff on Internet of Things thing. Yeah, sure, whatever. And they're like, oh, it's an actual project. Oh, okay.
You were disappointed. I was so excited. I finally knew something you had no idea about that was Mozilla related. So yeah, we'll see how it goes. I'll have the videos out on my channel. If it works, you'll see that. If it doesn't, you'll see that too.
Exactly. Can't wait to see what happens there.
Absolutely.
So let's move on to the email section of the show. We have a really interesting email that came into the show this week. Ryan, what did they have to say?
This is such a cool email. So I'm going to read. It's a short email. I'm going to read it verbatim because it's worth it. It says, I enjoy the show immensely. While Rocco is missed, you three guys have filled the void very well. A nice mix of personalities, especially Ryan.
I don't see that part. What?
Oh, I added that. My bad. My present age is 82, and I have been using Microsoft products since the early DOS days. That's where I started with Microsoft. Well, not with Microsoft, but I started computers with DOS in my father's computer shop, which I think eventually helped me with Linux and not being scared of the terminal and command lines and stuff. But in any case, he goes on to say, up to and including Windows 10. I am the family support person and often am called up to do software repairs, including installing new operating systems. Some years ago, tried Red Hat and got frustrated and ditched it. 2 years ago, I decided to try Linux Mint and got hooked. Long story short is that I spend 95% of my computer time on Linux. We're going to get that to 100. We sure are eventually. I've tried many versions of Linux, but now spend my Linux time on Mint 19 with KDE. Arco Linux with KDE, and MX17. Throwing some love out there for MX, our friend Dolphin out there. So, Richard, it is awesome that your email, you're 82 years old. You started out with Microsoft, but found the much more glorious Linux out there. And obviously, being the family support system, it's much easier, as our prior email talked about, supporting Linux systems than it is Windows out there. So I love this email. So awesome.
Yeah, this is a fantastic email. As soon as I saw it, I was like, this is going in. This is going in. Like the imagine, like just when I actually basically when I saw he said he was 82, and I was like, this is interesting just by default of that. But then also go into like how he's the tech support thing, and he's talking about how he recently got into Linux after like the long career of using Windows and helping people with Windows and stuff like that. For me, when I first went to Linux, when I first transitioned primarily to Linux, it was like a lift a burden off my shoulders type thing. So like the amount of time he's probably spent with like helping people is just like the idea that a lot of that could just go away is like such a fantastic. I wonder if the 5% is still helping people though.
It could be. That would be acceptable probably. Then 5% of just booting it up just so you can get the ISO burnt and then switch them to Linux.
Yeah, exactly.
Perfect. Well, thank you again, Richard, for your email.
This is awesome. Thank you. So up first in the show, we're going to do something different. There's a really interesting thing and a lot of excitement brewing around the Juno release for Elementary OS. So we actually had an opportunity to sit down and talk with Daniel Foré from Elementary to get the inside scoop of the release for Juno 5.0. So joining us this week is Daniel Foré from Elementary OS.
Hey, how's it going?
Thanks for joining us. We actually did an interview with Daniel on episode 62 of Destination Linux. So if you would like to check out more about, learn more about Daniel and Elementary OS, we really in-depth, deep interview on that one. So you can check that out. And today we wanted to had you come on and talk about the newly released Elementary Juno 5.0. So let's talk about the Elementary names. Your distros have a name based on like Roman gods, Greek gods, things like that. And I was curious, when you picked Juno, was there any particular reason why you chose that particular name, or was it just because Juno?
Oh, come on, Michael. What was that?
That's a dad joke. You're welcome.
Oh, man. No, there's no like super hidden meaning behind it or anything. We just kind of go through and look up different names of deities and stuff and go, oh, that one sounds cool. So this one sounded cool this year.
Nice.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, listen, there is a ton of excitement for Juno. There's been excitement building nonstop. It's been in our Telegram group. As soon as the beta came out, people were grabbing it and playing with it and giving their opinions on it. And so it's got to feel really good to have so many people excited about this. And we're finally here. So what are some of the features that you're most excited about, though, that happened during this release with Juno?
Yeah. So, basically our overall goal for Juno was to do like three things, right? One was to refine our user experience even further, was to improve productivity for our new users and our seasoned users, and to really work on our developer platform. And I think we like nailed it on all aspects there. And for me, I think like some of the things like Nightlight, make it way easier to work throughout the day. We have stuff like the new location services pop-up. So when applications try to access location services, now we throw a pop-up and ask you if that's okay beforehand.
Nice.
Nice.
Yeah. And then another one that I really like is housekeeping. So that's kind of a new setting where you can automatically trash or automatically permanently delete old trash files. So you don't have things hanging out in your trash forever.
I like that.
Yeah, but that takes away that mystery of you've trashed stuff 6 months ago, and then you go and finally see the icon and realize you have all this trash sitting here, and that's why you have no space.
Yeah, well,
I don't know.
It also ruins the whole the treasure discovery of things that you could keep
that were supposed to be deleted. They weren't. No, I love that feature, and I like the some of these features like Nightlight and things. And we've talked about this, I think, before in a prior episode about Nightlight being one of those features you don't know you need until you have it, and then you can't live without it. And those little touches and things make just a really good experience. Are there any features that you weren't able to sneak in to Juno in time before it got released?
Yeah, so the big one is the installation and onboarding, big redesign. So we did a lot of work collaborating with System 76 on that. And the installer portion totally works, and that's what's shipping in Pop! OS today. But the actual onboarding and setup experience is the other half that still needs work. And so that's something that we're going to look at for the next probably point release of Elementary OS.
That's awesome.
And about the App Center, like it's one of the most interesting parts of Elementary OS, arguably, and it's also getting some love from what I've heard. And what are some of the improvements you've made to the App Center?
Yeah, so we definitely done like a ton of performance and stability improvements. People found like little issues here and there that were causing crashes with certain types of data. So we want to make sure like that the application is really robust, and no matter whether data being passed through it is valid or not, or coming through like third-party software sources, that we're dealing with that in a good way. So it's way more stable and robust, even when you do some tweaks to the system now. But the biggest thing I think for App Center is kind of our push to continue helping developers with funding, and that now we have the system in place where you can go to a developer's page, and if they've decided to monetize their app, then you can throw money at them at any time, not just when you download the app, even before you've downloaded or after you've downloaded. And then on the updates page, if you download an app for free and then you get an update for it, it'll prompt you again and say, hey, would you like to throw some money at this developer? And you can always choose to pay $0, if you still want to keep trying it and stuff like that. But we really want to encourage users to help fund the software that they're downloading.
Yeah, I mean, that's a noble goal, because there's a lot of issues where software has been fantastic and it just stops being developed because people lose their motivation. And one of the things is they don't have time to devote to it, and voluntarily. So if they were able to get money from it, it gives them more motivation to continue the work that they're doing. So that's a fantastic thing. So I'm looking forward to it, to see what happens, both for the developers and out of curiosity, to see if this model can work.
Yeah, I think our ultimate goal is to try to get to a point where we can help provide a living for open source software developers and make it so it's not just a hobby, but it's something that they can actually do and put food on their table from.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, about the App Center, as far as I know, it's currently limited to elementary OS. I mean, I'm sure that many other people using other distributions would love to be able to have the App Center, maybe using something like, I don't know, app images, snaps, or Flatpaks to have basically the same experience, but on any other distro. This would also help developers getting funds out of their open source apps, right?
I mean, I think that choice is up to developers, how they want to do that, if they want to pursue that kind of cross desktop model. I think for a lot of our developers that they really like that we have a known environment and a known development path. And for a lot of people who maybe don't necessarily have a lot of time to try to support tons of different distros, that they can come in and kind of play inside of a known area, and for them that gives them more time to work on the things that they care about and not kind of fix compatibility issues. So I think there's a lot of our developers who maybe aren't really interested in that cross distro story.
Yeah, so that's actually interesting, because later in the show we're going to talk about a discussion that's very on par with that topic of whether you could look at elementary as a platform type of thing rather than just a distro. So I agree, that's an interesting thing. But would it be you're still releasing everything at the App Center itself is going to be open source at some point, or if it is already so if a distro wanted to include it, they could at that point, right?
Yeah, everything is open source top to bottom. The publishing backend and everything is all completely open source, and that's all up on our GitHub page. So Pop! OS ships a fork of the App Center client right now, so it doesn't have any of the payment stuff, and it doesn't involve our repo, but they're actually using just the actual software installation and exploration part of it. So it's useful for other distros, even if you're not trying to replicate that store experience. But if you did want to set up your own instance of the App Center dashboard backend, you could totally do that.
All right, fantastic. So another thing that's really interesting that Elementary is really known for is the design and just the overall appeal and beauty of the setup. So what have you changed for Juno that's based on the aesthetics?
So I think the biggest thing that people will probably notice is a lot of the changes to iconography. And especially in this release, when you open files, you'll notice that we switched from blue folders to manila folders now.
Mm-hmm. Actually, it's kind of silly that a lot of people I saw those people are kind of bothered by that change, and that I'm a big fan of it, because the manila folder is more clean for a folder design, and it also means that you're not going to have to worry about whether your icon set matches that particular folder.
Yeah, exactly. So it's kind of a divisive change, but I think it's a change for the better, and I think it'll kind of help our branding, especially for people there's still a lot of people who, for some reason, are expecting when they open Elementary OS for it to be Mac-like. So I think that getting further away from some of those aesthetics that will help our brand disassociate from those expectations.
Okay. Do you have a, speaking of which, are you saying that you don't really prefer the Mac comparison, or is that just more like you want to, if someone compares it, you just want to make it where it's distinct enough that, you know, it's not like a complete copy type thing? Because a lot of people do like kind of assume it's a copy just by the default design. Basically, it's just because of the dock at the bottom, but still.
Yeah, I think people see like the dock and the blue folders and they immediately think like, oh, you know, it's supposed to look like Mac OS. And then they start using it and they realize that like everything's different. Like it's not like Mac OS at all. And then they kind of get upset and they're like, oh, well, this isn't what I expected things to be. So I think that a big challenge for us branding wise is to make sure to set those expectations and make sure that when people are evaluating Elementary OS, that they do it for its own sake and they aren't expecting it to be like something that it's not.
It's really interesting because I think for a while that was considered a huge compliment, right? Like it's Mac-like, it's beautiful, it's gorgeous, it's simplistic, because that's what Mac was known for. But it is interesting too, as a developer standpoint. Well, number one, after Donglegate, that's not so much of a compliment, I guess. And then, but from a developer standpoint, you want your product to stand on, and Elementary does. It stands on its own. There are similarities you could make between any OS and say, well, this has a start menu, so therefore it's like Windows. That's not really the case. Elementary completely stands on its own. I think originally it probably was meant, when people were doing reviews on it, to be a compliment of its beauty and simplicity initially, meaning it gets out of your way and you can just use it. But now it's probably becoming more of those from a developer standpoint, where you want to differentiate yourself from that enough where that's not what you're going after, right? It's just beautiful on its own. And we talked about that in our prior interview, that your background in history and really making things beautiful has gone a lot into making Elementary what it is and making it so popular. But besides the beauty, I like to know what's under the hood. So if we pop the hood on Elementary, what are some things behind the scenes that you got into Juno that are improvements to the experience, but people might not necessarily see from an aesthetic standpoint?
Yeah, I think, one of the biggest things for us this cycle was really digging through all of the issue tracker and targeting as many issues as we possibly can. I think this cycle we fixed something like 700 issue reports or something like that. We closed in the Juno cycle. Huge. Yeah. We went through a lot, and we're working on cleaning up like our code quality and being a lot more strict about that. We moved everything over to the Mason build system, and doing that really exposed a lot of issues that we had in our build system and helped us to be better about localization, believe it or not, because of the localization tools that are available in Mason build. So this is like probably the best thoroughly localized version of Elementary OS we've ever produced from like a technical standpoint.
Nice.
Yeah.
Do you guys do any work with any specific attention to gaming or anything in performance in that, say for maybe it's not just gaming, but GPU compatibility overall, or is most of that just kind of built into the kernel you adopt?
Yeah, I think the majority of like hardware compatibility stuff is coming directly from Ubuntu. When we first started out, we were trying to poke into some of that stuff, but we realized that the more patches that we carry on some of the low-level stack, the longer it takes us to respond when there are things like security updates. And so being really close to the low-level stack with Ubuntu means that we can get security updates right away directly from the Ubuntu security team.
Yeah, that's a good reason to do it. And it also does it because it's based on 1804. That means that you could also use the hardware enablement stack, right? Because they said that it isn't by default is 1804, or that's the point release maybe.
I think it's 1810 is going to have it by default. 18.04 Mate has it now.
Oh, okay.
As I understand it. Yep.
Yeah, I believe that the rolling enablement stack was supposed to happen either this release or it already happened or something like that. But yeah, I know that the upstream hardware enablement stuff is now rolling, so that's really convenient for our users.
Awesome.
Okay, awesome.
So for those people that have been enjoying the beta up until now, do you think there are any changes that the beta users will enjoy with this official stable release?
Yeah, so I definitely would recommend that anybody on the beta does a clean install of the final, because there's always little things here and there. I know that there are some things that changed between the first beta and the second beta regarding like input method localization and things like that. So there are some packages that I'm not 100% sure would have been replaced or upgraded cleanly there. So there actually was a ton of localization fixes. I know that there was a bunch of stuff that landed recently in regards to online accounts. Also, we've been working kind of in a more upstream collaborative space with kind of the free desktop on the single sign-on online accounts. So nice. There's a big transition there to the kind of new free desktop platform for that.
Those are some big changes. Do you find people with the beta don't really understand the concept of beta? Is that something you guys run into from a development standpoint? Meaning tech people like myself that work in the industry, I know what beta means. It means you're there to test. You're not going to have all the full features, but you think everybody kind of gets that based on what you guys are seeing from the beta release?
Definitely not. No matter how many warnings we put up and stuff like that, there are people who like blog and then direct link to the download, and users never see that stuff. And then like I just had an issue report the other day where a user was frustrated because they encountered a really big problem, and the problem was addressed in Git master relatively quickly, but a package update hadn't come down, and they were upset because they were like, hey, I've had this on like all my production machines, and like this is my main OS, and this is not ready to be a main OS.
Wow.
Like, yeah,
no.
Well, that's what a beta is. Like,
yeah,
do
exactly.
people download stuff like without even looking at what they're clicking?
Yeah, that's true too. But yeah, but the idea they're putting on a production machine when it has beta, every time it's on if you go to the website, every time it's even clickable, there's a beta thing next to it. It's like, yeah, dude, don't touch that. If you don't put it in production, right?
Even the default wallpaper says beta now.
At least that's
a good method.
I think that's a good move.
Yeah, that's a good idea. So
I think the next step is only like not releasing any non-stable build like as an ASO, but
or maybe it's like when they launch it, instead of like those little get started guides, it pops up and says, "Are you sure you should be using this?"
We'll have to do one of those ones like GitHub where it's an entry and they have to actually type in like, this is an unstable, not for production. Otherwise they'll just click OK.
Exactly. That might be a good idea. Or you could have a little test of their knowledge of Linux in the industry. If they pass the test, they can download the beta.
Otherwise, it just like erases itself.
That'd be interesting. But so more back to like serious note. What as far as like the community and like let's say for people who have been testing it and want to contribute more, how like genuinely testing, not just randomly installing it. How can they contribute to the elementary team after this release and like for like point releases and things like that?
Yeah, so the best place to get started with that is on our website. We have a Get Involved page. So that's elementary.io/get-involved. And there's a big page there that lists like all the different ways that you could possibly get involved, from translations, desktop development, web development, design, like everything is all listed there with tons of links and documentation. Nice. Yeah, so that's the best way is to go, and there are like bite-sized issues on GitHub if you're interested in desktop development, and we have a community Slack that you can jump into, and everybody's super like engaged and helpful there. Like we really want to help people of all skill levels get involved and learn more.
Nice.
So if I have no background, say in development or coding per se, could I still go out, hang out in the Slack, and people aren't going to make fun of me and say, "Get out of here, loser"?
No, definitely. There's a lot of like little things that pop up that require like no coding experience whatsoever to fix. Like somebody went around recently and submitted a bunch of patches for anywhere that it's using 3 periods instead of the ellipsis character, just to like switch those.
Nice.
Or to like improve grammar on different strings or whatever. Like there's a bunch of stuff that it doesn't require you to know how to write code to make it better.
See, I found a place where I might be able to help Michael, and then in my credentials, I can say contributed to elementary.
Yeah.
How cool would that be?
Yeah, and then they click on it, like learn more typos.
Yeah, typos. Fixed the wrong period in the wrong area. Hey, but it helped, and I could have it in there. So we talked about in episode 62 your love of music. You have music out there on SoundCloud, and you also do audio production. Not necessarily always utilizing Linux tools, but there are new tools that have become available. So I was curious, as somebody who produces music, have you had a chance to check some of those out, like Reaper and Traction and some of those? And are you seeing the audio production capabilities in Linux improve?
You know, I've heard about some of the new tools coming out, but I haven't got a chance to check them out yet, just because I've been so busy with Elementary OS stuff. I haven't really done any music stuff lately.
Gotcha. Well, that makes sense.
So until like the next 2 years, that the next Ubuntu LTS will come out, you will have some time to dedicate to your music and stuff. But once those 2 years finally pass, what do you think we can look forward to with the next elementary release?
So the way that Elementary OS releases, we actually continually release updates. We don't have a feature freeze until the next LTS. Like, we'll continue to push out new features throughout the life cycle of Juno. So
you don't get a break. Great.
No breaks. No sleep.
Damn it.
Never stop.
No sleep till Brooklyn.
Right. So the next biggest ones are finishing up the installation and onboarding work. And I'm looking forward to pushing that into a Juno Point release as soon as possible. And then there's a lot of work going into online accounts integration and making that better. We have a big rewrite of Mail that we started that's going to be based off of libcaml, which is the mailing backend that powers Evolution. So we've been doing a ton of upstream work there to make that available for more applications to use.
So the Pantheon Mail is the one that was forked from Geary, right?
Right.
So the Pantheon Mail is going to be using like a backend with Evolution. So like it's going to have the functions of Evolution theory, and then have the presentation of the Pantheon Mail style.
Yeah. So we're doing a whole a complete rewrite of it, like from scratch. With so we have tons of UI improvements that are going in, but it'll be basically based around a lot of the similar UI concepts that we're using in Mail right now. But with all the capabilities of Evolution hopefully baked in, as far as being able to add like different kinds of accounts. And we're really interested in looking into things like encryption and stuff like that.
That is very cool, because one of the things that I always liked the way that Evolution worked, but not the way it looked. And I always liked the way Geary looked, but not the way it worked. So combining that as sounds exciting. So I'm looking forward to that. So anyway, thanks for coming on the show, and we appreciate it. So, and also thanks you for all your work in the open source community and pushing Elementary and pushing the tasks to try to get developers to have incentive and get paid to do their work. It's a very, very cool approach. And I look forward to seeing what, trying out the latest release even more than I already have. And again, thanks for coming on the show to discuss Juno.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
You have no idea how many people you've appeased in our Telegram. Thanks, Daniel.
All right, take care.
So next up in the show is something that is very controversial, but at the same time has a lot of potential to being a good thing. And that is Microsoft has announced that they are going to be taking 60,000 patents of theirs and partnering with the Open Invention Network, so that communities in projects that are utilizing certain packages, they won't have to worry about patent trolls that are potentially taking these rights, these licenses for these different patents, and then attacking these projects to try to take as much money as they can. And there's actually what's really interesting. I was listening to an interview with one of the people who run another network called the Lot Network, and he said that there's actually the amount of money that is spent over every year with just dealing with patent trolls from these big companies is around $26 billion. That's an insane amount of money. So the idea that Microsoft has decided to do something where they're joining the network to help other projects and to not have to deal with it is pretty interesting. But there could be some caveats. What do y'all think about it?
I mean, obviously Microsoft isn't releasing the Windows source code. Neither they're opening up DirectX or any of the other proprietary APIs to Linux or any other non-Windows operating system. So I don't know. I still think that Microsoft has something like boiling that we don't know about. I don't believe this whole Microsoft loves Linux thing.
Yeah, so it's kind of like there's some, as far as they love Linux, there's things that they're doing things that are good, but at the same time, like for example, there's a lot of people who've said, if you wanted to prove that you care about the open source community and stuff like that, then you have to like stop patent trolling people and stuff like that. And that's a fair point, and they're kind of doing it now. So does that move the goalpost of saying if you really care about it, you would open source other things or make it like Microsoft Office work on Linux and stuff like that? Like, do we?
Well, isn't there always a goalpost that we're going to move here and say, you've got to give credit where credit's due, right? Microsoft has made strides here that were never made before. And yes, it does feel like we're in a parallel universe we now live in. Google and Facebook are bad guys, Microsoft good, maybe-ish. And that's kind of the parallel universe that we have flipped in here. And I think we need to give credit to the fact that Microsoft has extended these patents. It does protect open source. It also probably protects some of their products, like their new servers and things that they've open source or utilizing open source behind the scenes to run, and some of the projects that they're on. So for all we know, it's maybe behind the scenes, these patents are really helping them out.
I mean, I would bet it's more than likely there's self-interest, like their self-interest is probably the most important thing. Is like they're releasing it because they are utilizing things that could be affected by their own patents. So that might be another reason why they're doing it.
Sure, perhaps, or maybe it's just a nice gesture. Yes, it would be nice if they added Office into Linux and they open source, DirectX and all of these things that we would love to see. Maybe it would happen in the future. Probably not. But I do think that if we have to give credit where credit's due.
Oh, yeah.
The Open Invention Network is a pretty cool network of basically they are set out as a defensive group to protect Linux from patent trolling. Mm-hmm. So that's their whole goal. So by Microsoft releasing it into this, and there's several other companies that are involved in the OIN that obviously I think you have to join the OIN to utilize these patents. So a lot of the headlines are saying completely open source, and it's not really true. I don't think it qualifies as that.
Yeah, it's not open source. It's been promoted as being they're open sourcing their patents, and that's not even really possible without, but like legally. But as far as like open sourcing, they would have to be not like going to a particular. You would have to be a member of that network in order to use it if they were actually open sourcing it. So it's not really open source. But it's a nice gesture anyway, because not even that was not even just the OIN, the Open Invention Network. They also joined the LOT network to do something that's similar. So it's not like they're just focusing on one potential partnership network. They're doing at least a couple of them, maybe even more in the future. So they are showing that they have changed in some way. I don't know whether they're really changing that much or not, but it does seem like they are they're trying to express that they have changed at least in some way. And I saw this one article, they were asking the question, are they now changing their motto to embrace, extend, protect? It's like maybe.
I think the protect part is part of extend in some way. I don't know. I of course I cannot not give them credit, because at least these patents are now kind of usable by open source projects, and it's better than nothing. I mean, but it's not perfect. It's not really. Again, we're moving the goalpost, but that's pretty normal. The limit here is when everything goes GPL, we will be finally happy. But until that point, that's still not perfect.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, Microsoft could make a lot of money off of these and have. In fact, as I understood it, reading some of the articles, some of these patents, they make a lot of money off of. So, as a business that was founded on the idea of making money and making lots of it, to see them do this and lose out on potentially some of those funds, I think is a interesting gesture. We're seeing a lot of changes at Microsoft. Some of those are really good. I think rightfully so. We're all sitting there going, I don't know if I still want to shake your hand, but I guess you can come inside the house. And
I'll give you a fist bump, but that's about it right now.
Might fist bump you, but so their vice president said the reason they did this is we want to protect open source projects from IP lawsuits. So we're opening our patent portfolio to the OIN, and that's it. So irregardless, I think it's interesting. Most people are looking at this as a very positive move, but yeah, I think ultimately we want to see more. But I'm glad to see Microsoft even doing this, because a lot of companies do nothing. So there's something there.
I never would have expected something like this to happen from Microsoft. Before when Ballmer was around, it was just like Linux is cancer, and he's specifically said that. There's I never would have expected anybody to take the reins and then basically change Microsoft into a potentially partner with Linux. Much less even if they do actually love Linux, we're yet to see that completely, but at least they are changing. We're we can be buddies, I guess.
Yeah. Fist bump. I like what you said, fist bump. We'll fist bump them right now.
Fist bump,
So we've got some good news there with Microsoft. I think ultimately it's good news. They're great if there's more of it, but that's some good news. Now here may be some bad news, Michael. This one's going to shock you. Flat paks are a security nightmare. At least according to one website, okay? One website out there, flatkills.org, a really mysterious name. You don't know if it's a positive or a negative being kills in it. But flatkills.org is taking aim at what they say are a number of security issues with flat paks that they are pointing out here, and essentially saying that they are a major security issue. So I'm a huge fan of flat paks. I'm a huge fan of snaps. I'm a huge fan of app images, because it just makes my life easier. I can get these applications and start using them versus having to do any of the other steps that are necessary to get packages otherwise. It's just very simple, and you can write scripts, make it really easy to grab it. I enjoy these, so I was kind of shocked when I saw this article and thought, well, what are some of these security issues? So they listed out 3. There's a lot of them on the website, but there are 3 core ones, Michael, that he has here. You want to read through those?
Sure. The first one says that many Flatpak apps have file system write permissions. And that's definitely a thing, and that's one of the things about not having a sandbox is another one, and they're kind of related to each other. And there's also the other thing that says there's slow or no critical security updates to the apps or the runtimes that are providing those apps functions. Now, the one part I kind of wanted to point out was the many Flatpak apps, they're saying that they don't have they have write permissions allowing them to modify the file system. So does every traditional file format we have currently. So if that's a security problem, then so is debs and RPMs and everything else.
No, the problem here is that you have to think inside, in the mentality of these apps being, apps, as if you were on a phone. You see that on Android, for instance, you see having these granular permissions, because you can trust what's in your repos, but you can't really trust stuff from third-party vendors. So the concern here is about if a third party with a proprietary app gets the said app inside of, let's say, FlatHub, then it could compromise a lot of machines, a lot of computers. And that's, I think, the biggest concern. But at the same time, if you want to get those apps in your Linux system, you have to take the risk, or you just don't use them. So if you're paranoid about apps abusing their permissions, then just don't use them. I mean, at the end of the day, it really boils down to how strictly Flatpak apps are audited by the repo maintainers. And as a developer myself, I actually got one of my apps on FlatHub, and I can tell you that the maintainers are very scrupulous.
Well, that's good.
That is very good to know. I mean, if you think about it, when you compare it to Android, where the software isn't, in the Android system, the software is not open source as a whole. Most of the software is proprietary. And Android, I have major problems with their system of basically allowing apps to have access to carte blanche access to your system. And a lot of times the way that they talk about the file system that you're opening up in Android is in such a way where it's giving them access to read all kinds of things that type of app has no business asking for to begin with.
Yep.
And if you don't accept those terms, the app will not even work. And there's just a lot of issues like that. So if Flatpaks became like that, yeah, I'd be really concerned. But most of the things out there now, Flatpak has introduced, for instance, letting you know what the permissions that it's asking for, much like Snaps has. So if it needs permissions to a specific area, it's going to ask you that when you're installing the Flatpak. I've had that for the last, I don't know, couple weeks now when you try to install Flatpak. Additionally, a lot of the software out there is going to be open source. Not all of it, I guess, because there are some possible for proprietary software to be out there. So you're going to find those issues a lot faster. And like you said, they seem to be scrupulous in looking through those. But I think even more important is Flatpak is only version 1.0. Like, this is a very new thing here. So there are things they could do to probably fix that. I think the way that this site goes about it is kind of, I don't know, sounding the alarms crazily for something that probably if they sat down and had some discussions on, they could find potentially some solutions for some of the issues that they're talking about here.
I mean, the solution exists and we've been using it for a very long time. It's using like repos from your distro, and that's basically all you can do about it. As soon as you have an app store of sorts that accepts apps from like third-party developers, you're gonna face this problem. And in the past weeks, months, we've been hearing a lot about these kind of issues. For instance, the Snap Store having like crypto miners in a game, I think it was, or again some weird malware inside of the AUR. It's normal to some degree. If you allow third-party apps, the users should be aware of what they're installing, and it's no different from going in the Play Store and downloading some crapware that, I don't know, collects data on you.
Right. Yeah.
There's definitely some issues where there's potential to have bad actors in any kind of repository unless that repository is completely restricted of who is allowed to do anything. But there's also going to be some negatives to doing that as well. So if you care about security and there's no possible chance, then if you just use your distro's repo, then they're probably good to go, even though there's a potential that they didn't really package everything and they didn't pay attention to every single piece of line of code, because there's really no way for them to do that. So even then, there's kind of a potential, at least a small potential, that there could be some bad actors in that, because one person who's volunteering their time, and that time has been they're not gonna be able to do it like a full-time job, and they're also managing like 300 packages. There's a potential that they really can't pay attention to everything anyway. So even with the repositories, there is still something there you kind of have to pay attention to.
Yeah, I mean, you have dangers in all of these, right? You have dangers in PPAs. That could be an issue
PPAs
as well. A lot of people,
thing.
I mean, that's like the number one. When I first started with Linux, everyone's like, oh, you want that software? Here's the PPA. Add the PPA, and then you go in there. And I didn't think anything of it till later. I found out, well, I mean, those can be dangerous, right? I mean, all of this stuff has the potential to have some danger behind it.
Right.
I think, this website is targeting Flatpaks by themselves for some reason, when I would say that wouldn't any of these new architectures potentially, like snaps, like app images, wouldn't they all have the potential to have this happen? And like Gab said, it's even happened with the snap before with the game. So, I mean, these are things that we have to overcome, but I think, the solution certainly isn't throwing it all out the door. And
right. And Flatpak has actually already taken into consideration some of these issues of the sandboxing. They're already working on making more sandboxing with
portals.
With the portal system.
Right.
So and interesting enough, the XDG portals that they're working with for Flatpak, they're actually also in collaboration working with Snaps to implement those in Snap packages. So there's a lot of potential that can be addressed, and say that there's improvements that can be made, but to say that they're outright just terrible is, or a security concern is just, I think just kind of FUD. I don't really think that there's that much clout in this argument of saying that they're just outright security problems. I think there could be improvements, but that's true for everything. I mean, you could say the same thing about deb files that you download from any website.
Well, what do you guys think about the way this individual went about it, creating a website, flatkills.org, kind of raising the bell? Is this a good way of getting everyone's attention, or is this a bad thing?
It worked as far as attention goes because we're talking about it. So
darn it, they win, I guess.
I mean, in that sense, if your only goal is to get people talking about it, I guess that's a good way to do it. I'm not saying you should do that as a method, but maybe it would.
You know what? This method of opening a website with a flashy name and stuff actually reminds me of big security vulnerabilities, Meltdown, Spectre, and I don't know. There were some older ones that I don't actually. Heartbleed.
Heartbleed was a big one. Yeah, Crack had one. Yeah,
exactly. They all had a big flashy name, a website. Did some of them even get a trademark? I don't know.
I think there was one that got a trademark for the logo, but I don't remember which. I think it was. I think it might have been the Meltdown Spectres one or something like that.
Possibly. Anyway, what I'm trying to say here is that this is not the right way of talking about these issues. Why are you even opening a website to expose an issue about Flatpak? That's so niche, and it seems kind of weird to me. It seems like these people is trying to push some agenda, against Flatpak, but I'm not sure where it could be coming from, to be honest.
Yeah, or what their goal is in general. Are they trying to push the traditional formats? Or are they trying to push a different, format, or what is the end goal?
The website author says the way we package and distribute desktop applications on Linux surely needs to be rethinked. Sadly, Flatpak is introducing more problems than it's solving. There you go.
I can't agree with them.
Yeah, I don't know what I'd have to do some more research to give a full opinion, but I kind of at this moment I can't really agree with that yet. But let's move on to some more upbeat news, and that would be that would be a Snap package has now been coming for Plex server. And this is really cool because Plex Media Server is a very popular media server that makes it ridiculously easy to have your own self-hosted media server. And Ryan, didn't you say you've used this before?
Yeah, I love Plex, and I know a lot of people use Kodi as well. Kodi is a very popular alternative to Plex out there. But I have a special love for Plex, and I'll tell you why. When my channel was first starting out, I could get attention from nobody because nobody cared what you're doing when you first start a YouTube channel. I had done a little video on Plex setting it up, and Plex actually reached out, and the video at that time hadn't got a lot of views. Now I think it's up to a lot, but at the time maybe had a couple hundred views, and they're like, hey, thanks for doing a review. Here's a free lifetime pass. And I just thought that was such a cool way of reaching out to the community and caring, because I was nobody. I probably didn't get them a single customer, but they just appreciated the fact that people were out there talking about their products. So either way, great marketing or really nice people, but they seem like it's more like really nice people because they were we got this news from Wimpy. He told me that they had basically turned this into a Snap and it's in beta right now. But this started when Plex joined the Snapcraft Summit in Seattle in February, and this kind of relationship has gone on. So I think it's really awesome that they are kind of becoming a part of the community there. They're participating in these events. And I also think it's awesome that Popey and Canonical and them are working together with these companies to bring these solutions to Linux. So maybe you use Kodi and that's what you're going to use forever. Great. Some people may have invested in Plex as their architecture, and now when they come to Linux, they can still have that. And it's a very powerful tool out there that you can use for watching, recording, live TV, media consumption, and all of that stuff. And I've used it for a long time and really like it. And now having it in a Snap, well, that just makes it that much easier.
Yeah, in a previous episode we talked about how installing Nextcloud was kind of a tedious effort. Then you get the Snap version; it's just this most simple thing. And Plex is a very similar situation where it's a little bit tedious to set it up, but now it's like just run this install command and you're good to go pretty much. Like that is a great thing for people who want to self-host this server. And I think Plex is a really good server. It looks really good and it has a lot of great functionality. The transcoding functions are really good for Plex. So like those are really nice. Cody's better, but that's it's still Plex is a really good project.
Yeah, I mean, this touches me personally. Not about Plex. I don't use Plex. I use MB actually. But about snaps, that's one thing that I always say. In my opinion, snaps versus Flatpaks doesn't really make sense as an argument, because I think that one does better some things that the other one doesn't. So in this particular case, I really think that the Snap nails it in the server space. Particularly because it's both very easy to use, and they also have a central repository, which is kind of good in server space again. And they also implement mandatory access control and confinement on the kernel using AppArmor, I think it is.
Yeah, AppArmor.
And that's like a very important thing for a server to have, like very very high security standards, because it's after all, at the end of the day, a server is a machine that you're gonna keep turned on every day, 24/7. So it has to be as secure as possible, because even if something happens, you could not be able to shut it down. You may not be at home or something, and it could be on, and you could have no way to like pull the plug on it, and if something bad happens, it's a mess. So having this additional layer of security on a server, I think it's a great thing. Plus, snaps are very easy to use, and they auto update. So
absolutely,
yeah, I totally agree.
And I thought it was interesting because I didn't know this. Maybe probably everybody else did, but I did not realize that Flatpaks, you couldn't run services like servers and things on them, whereas Snaps, you can run those type of services. Like that's why there's Nextcloud and Plex and things are better as a Snap. I didn't realize that was the advantage that Snaps had. Wimpy helped me with that, and then Michael, you kind of expanded on it too with me as well. But that really puts a big case for, I like using all of them. Like if it's whatever it's available in, if it's available in a Flatpak or a Snap, I'm going to grab it. So I'm not into the competition of one. I'm going to use one or the other or whatnot. I love all of them. But it is interesting to see Snaps having that unique advantage in that arena.
I totally agree. And there's actually been people who have the Flatpak team, when they first announced it, they said they were focusing mostly on desktop anyway, so that they didn't really have an intent to do the server. And the app images are basically the same kind of thing, where there's typically just like desktop applications. And I agree with the idea that I don't care which one is, which one you're going to use. If a developer picks one of the three, I'm happy that they picked one of the three, and I can just download it and run it. Like I don't really care which one you pick. Just if you pick one, let me know, and that's awesome. So we got to work on them, like putting more attention to it, because I've actually found this one application I was using for like a year, and then they already had a snap for it, and they didn't tell you unless you like read their blog post every time they made an update. And then when you did read it, it was in like this small features section, and like, oh, we added a snap for this. Like, okay, thanks for letting me find it. Finally finding this, it's great.
Right.
Now. But so it's really good, and I do agree that the snap system is like the server side of the snap system is like one of the main benefits of it. And every time I want to run a server, I have to consider, do I want to use Ubuntu or CentOS or something like that? And then if it requires me to do any effort, it's like, well, snaps will work, so that'll go.
So speaking of security, we have a big security news this week about Google Plus.
Yeah, it's fun. It's super fun.
Yeah, not so fun actually. So the big news is that Google Plus tried to actually cover up a big security flaw on Google Plus that apparently could have exposed the personal data, including full names, email addresses, birth dates, gender, profile photos, place, lived, occupation, and relationship status of up to about 500,000 people.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a massive thing. But it was only accessible to 438 developers.
Yeah,
so
that's it.
fine.
That's not that much. It's terrible. It's totally
They say
terrible.
that actually, according to what they're saying, there is no actual evidence that any of these data was abused by any of these 438 apps.
Yeah.
So again, I'm not sure how believable they are in their current position.
Well, the fact that they're telling us that we didn't we weren't honest with you and we didn't tell you that this happened, so we're totally being honest now. Like, yeah, sure. Yeah, I'm gonna believe that.
Exactly.
Like,
I just feel like a matchmaker here. I want to take Google and Facebook and be like, you two should be a couple. You guys just love violating people's privacy and completely, ruining any hope that we had with the whole do no evil tagline and everything else. I mean,
yeah.
I take this personally because I used to write in college. I wrote papers on the fact of Google and how they're doing things so differently when they first came out and how they're changing the world with how, employees and employer and employees interact with each other. And there were so many things they were doing that were so unique. And now they just, every time they're in the news, it's more failure. It's more failure. And the fact that it was covered up by them makes it even so much worse because they're like, well, we didn't want to get involved in the Facebook Cambridge thing.
Yeah, the whole reason is they didn't want bad
become
press.
A couple. My gosh.
Yeah, they're the two peas in a pod.
Yes, they are. They belong together.
And also specifically Google, just so you know, you do not get a fist bump.
That's right. We will not we're fist bumping Microsoft, and when you walk in the door, I'm kicking you in your shins. That's how I feel about you.
I mean, as far as Google Plus goes, no one cares. Pretty much no one cares. I mean, like, what's kind of funny is
everyone having a Google account, because if you have a Google account, you have a Google Plus.
Yeah, they forced everybody to have Google Plus.
Well, they removed that as well. Like, they killed that about 6-7 months ago or whatever. So
yeah, but the bug is in effect from 2015.
Yeah, but that means you didn't have to use it, so your data wouldn't necessarily be there if you didn't use it. So if most of the data that they're talking about wasn't there because they weren't using it, but they did also say that some private profile fields were also included in this information potential leak. So I'm not trying to defend them. I'm just saying there's Google Plus is not as important as most people would say. That's terrible and no one cares. I would agree that there are people who use it because they were forced because they were using YouTube because when they forced the YouTube thing. But at the same time, people usually just ignored that anyway, and their data probably wasn't there. But who knows?
Yeah, you all can make fun of me with my Apple device that still sends encrypted text messaging, this feature that Android can't seem to get together. But here, I feel like in their defense here, where they're saying, hey, we're going to release new privacy reforms in response to this, they actually admitted to more data that they're taking because so we're talking about apps and Gab, you mentioned the data that they're taking, but then in the response they say, well, we're going to do some new reforms that are going to stop third-party developers from accessing Android phone SMS data, call logs, and contact info. I'm like, wait, that's even more stuff that they had access to then.
I knew the contact info was being done because there's the whole, hey, would you like to see if your friends are on this platform? I always say no, but I understand that
they do it anyways.
That's possible, yeah. But the fact that they even have the ability, like Google in the first place at all, to read your text messages and to check out who you're calling and stuff like that, that by itself is appalling that you would even allow it. Much less we're going to fix it now. It's like, oh, thanks. That's the same thing where they're like, we're going to stop reading your Gmail and scanning all your Gmail emails after 15 years of doing it. Thanks. Yeah. Great.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the lesson to learn here is not to trust any big company at all. These do no evil.
I think there are some companies that you can definitely trust.
Wait a minute. We just talked about fist bumping Microsoft, and now you're telling me not to trust anybody.
About fist bumping Microsoft. I didn't say anything. I said I don't trust them.
That's
you weren't
fair.
Fist bump with me anyways.
That's fair.
Yeah.
I'm the one lurking in the shadows, watching you all and hoping everything goes well.
He's just waving with a little slight smirk, like, good luck with that.
Yeah. Good luck fist bumping them.
But so anyway, let's move on to the next topic, and that is Intel has launched their 9th generation CPUs with the Coffee Lake series, and they did this at the recent fall desktop event. And now I'm going to tell you everything I know about this particular piece of hardware.
Ooh.
So Ryan, tell them what I know.
I thought this one might boomerang back to me, but I actually have some backup here because, Gab, you know a lot about this stuff as well. But this is very interesting because Intel basically launched their new line of processors. Everybody's supposed to be really excited. And I'm not an Intel hater. I've had Intel, a lot of their processors in the past, and frankly, they run very well, and they have fantastic performance on them. As you guys know, I have the Ryzen 2700X right now that I'm absolutely in love with and was better than, as good as any Intel processor I've ever used. But this is the next series in line. This is the next latest and greatest thing. So you have the i9 9900K and some other processes out there that are meant to compete with the new Ryzen second generation line. And at least by some of the benchmarks that a lot of the, blogs and magazines and news stories would have you believe, are showing that there is a big improvement in speed over what AMD Ryzen processors have out there right now, which frankly would be expected because they're releasing processors after AMD has. It's kind of a tit for tat thing, which is great that we actually even have this competition, this tit for tat. So I would expect it to be faster, but there's a big price difference here. And there are some other things we can go into as well with the benchmarks not quite smelling right, Gab. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, so first thing, as you already said, seeing this kind of competition with AMD is very refreshing. Finally, we're seeing the industry of CPUs moving forward. And with this new family of Intel processors, sure, they're probably, benchmarks, I'm pretty sure they're not out yet, like reverse benchmarks, but they're probably going to be like actually the best gaming CPUs you can get because they have core and thread parity with AMD plus a form of like a clock advantage. So they're probably going to be faster than AMD's CPUs. And according to the press, particularly Gamers Nexus, I've watched a lot of their videos recently covering the whole Intel 9th gen release. So they said basically the whole event was pretty good, and that was weird. But one thing that happened after the event basically ruined everything else. So Intel actually contracted a company called Principal Technologies to make some benchmarks of their new CPUs, and basically this company, either they didn't know what they were doing or they were playing dumb because they were not clear about the procedures that they use for benchmarking. They use some GPU benchmarks when testing actually CPUs, and they also did some weird stuff with cooling because they said that they were using like the Noctua yada yada big old heatsink on the Intel CPUs, and they were using like the AMD stock fan on the AMD platform, and their excuse was, well, the Intel ones don't come with a cooler.
Great.
So there's something actually going on with these benchmarks, and the ugly thing here is that Intel actually put their logo, so their name on these benchmarks as if they validated them, and they actually went ahead and said that these results are in line with what they achieved in their labs. And I don't believe that. I just simply don't believe that because if you've seen benchmarks of any kind, like the usual ones you see for gaming, the numbers that come out of the Principal Technologies benchmark papers aren't realistic at all.
Yeah, it's interesting because this is not, we saw the same thing happen with NVIDIA 2080 card that released, right? There was a lot of controversy on how they've benchmarked that card. And basically some of the numbers that they were, well, some of the benchmarks that they were using, of course, they were setting new standards for how to rate their cards. And then some of the metrics that they were using to compare to say it's this much faster were also in some cases misleading Now you're seeing Intel, they hire this company to kind of do some benchmarks. They do some kind of funky things to make the AMD not look so well. Is this just friendly competition? This is how it works when you're out there competing. You're going to put your product in the best light and it's okay? Or as consumers, should we be angry about this and say we want this stuff to be knocked off and have fair results here so the consumers really know what they're getting? What do you guys think?
I mean, this is in no way fair to the consumer, because at the end of the day, this is false advertisement. And I think there's not much more to say about it.
Yeah,
I agree. I mean, it's kind of funny because there's used to be, it always goes back to this one thing I remember from like a decade ago or more when the first 1 gigahertz processor was announced. I don't remember which one it was. I think it was Intel who did it. But there was like, they went to the CES or whatever, and they're like, it's 1 gigahertz processor. It's a mega processor. And they had like liquid nitrogen underneath it. So it was like it's impossible to cool it. Like, this is a benchmark. This works. Like, no, it doesn't.
Right.
So, like, every
there's
time
a lot of ways you can skew this data to make them look better. But ultimately, look, I have no doubt the Intel i9-9900K is going to be a beast of a CPU. If you get one, you're probably going to have a blast gaming with it. But it is $499 to get that Premier card versus the 2700X at $329 to get those 8 cores and 16 threads. Even if I wasn't Team Red right now, I would probably still go Team Red because I just think you're getting more bang for your buck, because even in the 3D Mark scores that they had, it was 9,862 versus the Ryzen's 9,387. So it's so close already. You probably wouldn't notice the difference between the two unless you were doing some very specific tasks outside of, say, gaming and things, or some very specific type of gaming where you may notice some type of slight variation in speed and improvement. But really, either way, these are both some beastly CPUs that you're probably going to have a lot of fun with if you get your hands on one.
Yeah, that's basically almost $2 per point on that difference. So you're going to pay an extra $2 for every little point that you get above the.
I know you didn't do that in your head. So where's the calculator?
It's on the other computer.
Okay, cool.
I did round it up a little bit, so it's not accurate. It's just that's why I said about $2.
Okay, all right. Yeah. Somebody's going to check the math in the comments. Well, also in the news, we have the leading Linux desktop platform issues. And why are we so negative this week, Michael? Always negative news.
I don't think this is negative. I think this is an interesting discussion topics. Like this is somewhat of this there might be considered as negative, but I think this is a really interesting topic.
Well, this topic comes from Linux developer Simon Peter, who has worked on application standards for things like app images, etc. And he has released a really interesting video. And I definitely recommend you watching the whole thing, because at the end there's Q&A, and he handles some, I don't say they're rough or rude questions, but some tough questions after he presents this, and does a really good job, I think, handling. And I don't agree with everything that he has here, but he basically lists out what he thinks are the top issues for Linux. And I want to get your guys' opinions on some of these. One of the points here is, one of the top issues is hundreds of distributions causing further fragmentation. I know we've never heard this before, of an already small user base. He does put some interesting numbers to it. 3% of the desktop market is what Linux supposedly owns. We're talking about desktop market here specifically. Mm-hmm. If you take that 3% and you split it amongst all the desktop and distros, it's simply not scalable. What do you guys think?
I mean, that's pretty true. I mean, we all have our favorite distro, but at the same time, we all, we're all attached to and like latched on the Linux concept, but there's no one really like directly involved, like has this is what Linux is as far as an operating system. There isn't like the Linux operating system. And if you could actually argue that every single distro is its own separate operating system that are all competing with each other. They're also all competing with Mac and Windows. So the fragmentation thing is probably never going to go away probably never going away.
I don't think they're really competing with each other. I mean, you can possibly think that Arch is competing with Ubuntu or Red Hat. Maybe.
No, they are competing. I think they are all competing, but they're going for different targets. So there's different level of competition. But I'm saying like the distribution as far as like operating system. If someone goes to search for Linux, they're not going to find a Linux operating system. They're going to find a variety of different things. So whatever they find could be, just luck of the draw, and that would be a part of competition. Is like, which one are they going to find? Like, there is definitely a fragmentation issue and a competition. Whether there's also collaboration is a different topic, because all these different fragmented distros are also well, not all of them, but most of them are collaborating with each other as well. So there's a ton of working together, but they're in the views of like the people who are coming like new to Linux. They're really going to have no idea which one to use, because everybody talks about Linux, but at the same time, there's not really an option. That's
you don't have to take this from Michael, Gab. You get up to that mic and you tell him why he's wrong.
Well, I mean, he's not really wrong. I mean,
oh, darn.
Problem. Now, okay, we have to face it. So this problem has really existed for as long as Linux existed itself. Fragmentation is seen as a big issue, but really, the main focus here has to be formation of people. So people should know that if they're just starting out with Linux, they should go with Ubuntu or Linux Mint or Elementary. But if we solve this problem, then the problem of fragmentation goes away, because if people are using Ubuntu or Debian-based distros, they're probably going to be fine for the rest of their lives. If they want to move to something else, is because they have the technical knowledge to work around the quote incompatibilities that may arise. For instance, I myself, using Arch, don't have anyone releasing native packages for Arch. So on the AUR, you see a lot of RPMs or dabs that are repackaged for as like Pacman packages, but that's a non-issue, at least in my opinion, because they just work.
Right.
If like a company really needs to target a platform, let them target Ubuntu. Or if they need to target something more professional, like for instance, like Magic targets Red Hat and CentOS, and that's a perfectly respectable choice. There's nothing wrong about it. And at the end of the day, if their software is really valid, the community will find a way to make that Ubuntu app run on any other distro.
Well, wouldn't the counter argument be, let's say we want to get, I don't know, Adobe into Linux, and we tell Adobe, we say, hey, we've got 3%, this 3% market here, which 3% of a very big number, so it's still a lot of customers that you can target with getting your Adobe products now on Linux. Now, I'm not saying we'd want that, but let's just say it happened. Now, what happens when Adobe's like, okay, great, I want that full 3%, but how do I do that when I've got this system where I've got 0.5% of those users are on Arch. I've got 1% of the users on an Ubuntu base. I've got 1% of the users on a Red Hat. And so that 3% is broken up so much that now as a developer, I need that 3% to justify me paying to develop on towards Linux, but I can't tackle that full 3% because it's so fragmented.
Right.
Is that a real issue?
That's not a real issue, in my opinion. That's what I was trying to say before. So you have two options here, or either you target just one arbitrary platform. So you say you target Ubuntu or RHEL and just call it a day, and that's already enough for most things. Or you target a universal packaging format like snaps or flatpaks, or even better, app images that in my experience are the most compatible with any distro. But again, if you don't want to do that, if you still want to do like a simple classic package, just target Ubuntu, please. I'm begging you, don't try to do it all. You don't need to. Just target Ubuntu and everything will work out fine. I promise you, every Arch user that wants to use your product will use it.
Yeah,
so that's different, because Arch has a way different ecosystem than a lot of the distros. For example, like
but
Fedora wouldn't allow something that's proprietary in their repos.
There's RPM Fusion.
We're right, but they'd have to learn how that is. So, like for example, if a distribution, a user for going to Fedora has to learn that RPM Fusion is a thing. Fedora doesn't tell you that's a thing. So like they are working on adding it to the next version of their software center kind of thing, but it's not really a like, hey, you should check this out because there's extra software for you. But there's also Copper, which is kind of a similar situation for them. But the same thing is the companies are also getting massive backlash when they pick something like just Ubuntu. If they pick just Ubuntu, the like a large part of the community, at least a large vocal part of the community, will just berate them endlessly until they either give up completely or give in and start doing for other distributions, which 90% of the time is probably going to go, probably 99% of the time is going to just give up completely because they don't want to, why would they put that much effort and deal with that much hate if they're really not getting that much effort?
It reminds me a little bit of DaVinci Resolve, right? So they came out and they released DaVinci Resolve for CentOS, I think is the primary target is CentOS. And I had DaVinci Resolve. I had a Blackmagic Intensity Pro card. I tried to install DaVinci Resolve in Ubuntu at the time. Could not get it to work for nothing. So I'm sending support tickets to them, all this stuff, and they come back saying, sorry, we only use CentOS. And there are forums where people tried to get it to work in Ubuntu, and some were successful at times, some weren't. As I understand it, it may have gotten better now that they've added some additional OSs that they support. But I could go into Arch anytime and use it, by the way. At any point, I go into Arch. It had it there in the AUR. I could download it, use it. It worked perfectly. The Arch is a very different beast in the way that the users kind of take care of themselves and they find a way to get it to work, whereas the other distros don't have that unless you start getting into the universal package. The universal package really does seem to be the answer to this problem because the reality is this fragmentation is never going away. And I don't know that we want it to. Some people are calling for it, but I've rather grown to enjoy it. Like sometimes I get bored in Fedora and I'll boot into Arch. I'll get bored of Arch. I'll boot back into Fedora or Ubuntu Mate, or I like having those choices.
Well, to be fair, this particular keynote that was given or talk that was given is not trying to say that the fragmentation should go away. It's saying that the underlying base core of a standard API set and how the desktop should be expecting things and how developers could be expecting certain pieces of the API to be there.
Create standards, basically, is what you're saying.
He wants. He was basically just suggesting that he doesn't. He's also specifically said he doesn't know who's going to do it or how it could be done. But he's just saying that this is like if we ever want to make it where the fragmentation is not a problem, we either need to do the universal approach where he's also approaching that with the app images because he's the developer of app images. Like he's talking about just that, but it would be more beneficial to the entire community in the ecosystem if there was a standard that people could develop.
Well, he doesn't support Flatpak and snaps necessarily because he said specifically in there Flatpaks and snaps are not a solution, but rather a workaround adding another layer versus having a common desktop platform, much like the kernel is a stable platform.
No, his argument, my point is that he is the developer of app images. He created app images.
Right.
So his point is like this is a workaround that he thinks would be beneficial to the platform. But if we were to do it in a more core level approach for standards, then the app images wouldn't necessarily even need to exist.
Interesting. Well, listen, I think it's a really interesting conference. You guys should go out there and listen to, whether you agree with us or agree with him or don't. It's still interesting to hear some of the topics because he had a lot of other things he brought up in there. And he does try to provide some solutions as well, which makes it kind of unique. There's a lot of presentations that sometimes just drop these issues and don't really offer any fixes for them. So go check that out. We'll have a link to it in the show notes.
Yep.
So coming up next, we have some news regarding the code of conduct.
Yay!
I know people are going to be excited about this.
This is such a
Yeah, Michael is so excited he wants to talk about it right now.
Oh man, I just walked right into that. Oh,
well done.
Okay. So the recent code of conduct has been a little bit controversial, a little bit, and there's been actually some interesting changes that have been proposed by a kernel developer named James Bottomley. I think that's how you say his name. Yep. He's proposed 2 fixes that would change the code of conduct before it's been released in the 4.19 kernel cycle. And one of those, I think, is a really, really interesting approach. But we'll talk about the rest of them as well. But the first one is the redistribution of data for particular people involved in the project. The current situation is that he wants to change the wording of the code of conduct to say that if you're not allowed to give out information or redistribute the contact information unless it is already or ordinarily collected by the project. And the reason for this is because there's a situation where when you take code in a mailing list and you redistribute that code, you're automatically putting in the attribution to the person. So if they weren't going to do a patch this way, if they weren't to include this patch, it's potential that just by even contributing to the kernel itself, you're violating the code of conduct. So this is like if any of these things are added, this was one that probably should be, because it's a very good
I know our patrons are like, no, not more code of conduct, and probably our listeners too. But here's the interesting thing, and the reason why I want to bring this up. This is the reason why, because we talked about, do we include this or not? The interesting thing is they're starting to patch the code of conduct. So Linuxy, isn't it? Isn't that the Linux way? So
I mean, I was actually anticipating this. I didn't expect them to do it so quickly before it was even actually used.
That's why this is such great news to me, because they're doing what we do in the open source community and with Linux. We take something that gets controversial, they listen to the community, you kind of see what the fallout is, and then you go through there and patch it. So we had the story about Linus and some of his views, which I think cleared up some of the confusion there. And then I see these patches coming in, and all of the patches that are recommended here, I'm a huge fan of. Number one, this one is a simple thing, right? But then you have the Linux kernel developer, Gert Uterhoven, and I know I probably messed that up, and I apologize, but he put a patch to remove the explicit list of discriminating factors and instead wants to replace it with a harassment-free experience for everyone. So some of those factors and things that were put in there explicitly caused people to have a lot of the panic and scare, because people thought, well, maybe this other group is coming in and they're going to change things and all this stuff. But really what they're doing is they're taking this now and making it fit the community versus trying to, and making it a part of the community versus trying to adopt some third party COC and just leaving it as is and making everybody deal with it. So I think this is the very unique Linux way of dealing with things, to start patching it and improving it and shape it to Linux.
Yeah, I agree completely.
I mean, I really hope so. This could be very well a way to get out of this code of conduct nightmare that we're seeing, more from the community aspect of it, because the really interesting thing about this new code of conduct is the reaction of the community. And I mean, that's what the code of conduct is about, after all. So, but I don't know, there are too many weird parts involved that shouldn't be involved with each other, I think. So this is probably the effect of that.
Yeah, I think this is a good way of approaching those issues of those things that it should or should not be involved, because a lot of people are bothered by the code of conduct having specifics, but it sometimes being very ambiguous at the same time. So like they're setting up a potential of, this is what you're allowed to be rather than this is what you can't do. So the way he's modified it, first is doing the changing the redistribution thing solves one of the bigger problems of like the functionality of it, but the changing it so that the Gert, I'm gonna try Uterhoven, probably not right, but we'll see. We'll see who was closer. Hopefully he'll comment in the YouTube video or something like that. But anyway, I think his approach is really good, because it's showing that it's a harassment-free experience for everyone, and rather than specifically like pointing out people, because or pointing out factors of people, that could also mean like if you don't include literally every factor that exists, you are kind of automatically like setting that aside and saying that's okay. This way, when you're just doing it more specific to the overall goal, that could be more beneficial to the code of conduct itself.
Absolutely. So now that we have abused our poor patrons and listeners with more COC news, let's give them the happiest news of all, Michael.
Oh, yes. I am so excited for this and how ridiculous it is. This is a game that is recently come out of early access for Linux, and it's called A Gummy's Life.
Oh, it's so good.
Yeah, and it's a ridiculous game about it's ridiculous, but it's also ridiculously fun.
How's it any more ridiculous than strapping rockets onto a car and knocking around a soccer ball?
What's ridiculous about strapping rockets to a racing car?
Yeah. What? I don't understand your question.
I'm just saying, how is that any more ridiculous of playing soccer with a rocket-powered car than a gummy bear coming to life and killing other gummy bears?
Okay, one, you're implying that I don't acknowledge that Rocket League is ridiculous. It is, and it's awesome. Just like Gummy's life is ridiculous, and that's awesome.
And it's awesome.
So, like, the basically, it's an idea of like these candy becomes sentient somehow, and then they start battling each other in this weird battle thing. I don't know.
It becomes sentient. I love it. Yeah. Yes.
So, I don't know what this is just an interesting concept because it's basically like a third person arena battle fighting game, and there's actually some other games called Gang Beast. That's a very popular, or it's been around for a couple of years or so, I think, at least a year or so. And it's very similar to that. But what's really cool is that Gummy is has a lot more potential because you can have more people in it. You can, and the graphics are way better. It's got more game.
Well, you can customize your gummy, by the way. You want a striped gummy. You want a watermelon shaped gummy. You want a teddy bear gummy. I bought this game the second I saw it. I was like, I am spending the money because killing another gummy bear is just it's genius.
It's also hilarious when their blood is just gummy residue
gummy
stuff.
Goo. It just like splatters gummy everywhere when you beat on other gummies. And this is what I'm most upset about is there's not enough people playing this. The servers, you can still play the single player and stuff, but the servers are way too empty for the awesomeness that is a Gummy's life. So I am officially saying now, Ballistic Overkill has been kind of the official game we all play when we're done with Destination Linux. Sometimes we play it with patrons.
Yeah, outside of Rocket League.
I think a Gummy's life is going to take the place of Ballistic Overkill as our official. It needs to.
They can be together. They can be the equal level of awesome. That's fine.
Gab, will you play a Gummy's life with us?
I actually just wish listed it.
Yes, yes.
Nice. Because it is ridiculous, but it looks amazing. So I do have plans to get it this weekend. I'm going to show Ryan how much,
how powerful your gummy powers are.
Well, I was just gonna say how much of a Care Bear that I don't know.
Wow, that just didn't work. But what we will do is
not gonna work.
Live stream it with us having. I'm gonna buy a plethora of gummies and I'm gonna eat gummies and play this game. That way, I'm kind of killing them in real life and virtually.
You get to eat gummy whenever you kill another gummy.
Oh yeah, it's like
so the gummies you eat are only the ones you're able to kill.
That is brilliant. That's the reward system is you get to eat a real gummy.
You just took it meta. It's a gummy game inside of a gummy game.
So everybody needs to pick that up because you will see us playing it this week. A Gummy's Life. So very fun game out there. Also, since Zeb's not here, I couldn't torture him with a pixelated game, but I did pick a pixelated game out to torture Zeb with. It was Hazelnut Bastille, which currently has a Linux demo out available for it. This is very cool. If you are a fan of Zelda, this is a 2D adventure game out there that has some, nostalgic feel of like a Zelda-like game out there. Heavy conscious level design. They call it like a Metroidvania like progression system. Kind of the classic open world dungeon format, 16-bit graphics, lots of pixels that Zeb would just absolutely love out there. So this is a pretty cool game too. If any of you guys check this one out.
Yeah, it actually looks quite refined compared to many other pixel games that you actually see on the store. This actually looks like they put some very good effort on it.
Yeah, I think it looks awesome. It does remind me, even some of the dungeons and stuff look kind of Zelda-y, the way that they're presented and some of the bosses. Now, Michael, I know you may have an opinion on this, but I need you to hold that. I need you to channel Zeb and tell our listeners what would Zeb be saying right now.
Oh, it was something like, well, how long is this video? And how long would it take me to cancel this video? Okay, John.
Brilliant. Well done, sir. But for the rest of you that like pixelated games, this is a pretty cool one to go check out. So there's a demo available that you can download now and within Linux. So they made the demo available for all platforms, which I thought was cool. And if you like it, you can throw some support to their Kickstarter out there that they will be kicking off. So now we are in the tips and tricks of the week. And Gab, we are going to have you give us a tip and trick here.
what an honor. So originally, the app pick for today's week was Handbrake. So Zeb chose Handbrake as a tool to basically transcode your videos from into different formats. And Handbrake is really a multi-tool, and that everyone that works with video of any kind should have. It's a really simple and user-friendly tool, yet decently advanced to be able to change like the bitrate as well as the codec, and if you want to make it I don't know, if you want to take a movie and change only the audio codec, you can do that. It's a really useful tool, but what I want to tell you about today is actually FFmpeg, and that's very funny because Handbrake is based on FFmpeg. So FFmpeg is basically really this Swiss Army knife of video and audio. It does everything that Handbrake does, a little bit more, and it's a command line application. So the great thing about this is that you can use it to script stuff. So for instance, let's say you have a server where you keep all of your family videos. What you can do is you can program a script that whenever you put some new videos in a certain folder, takes them, transcodes them to like, let's say VP9, that's usually more space saving compared to H.264. And I don't know, maybe reduces the resolution to 720p and then removes the original file. That's something you can do with FFmpeg. Again, if a tool can be used from command line, it's scriptable, and that's a great thing in my opinion. Also, if it's not really that easy to use, the commands are pretty convoluted, and there are many options for depending on the codec and stuff. But if you can use Google, it's a really awesome tool.
Yeah, FFmpeg is a fantastic tool, and the convoluted methods of doing the parameters. It also matters what order you do those parameters in, which could be very drastic. You could just move one from one section and flip them up, like back to back, and that could destroy the output versus having the correct way. So that's also why something like Handbrake is a very useful tool, because if you don't want to deal with the command line, which a lot of people don't, and I understand that. I mean, I do like making scripts, and they're very useful. But Handbrake is a fantastic solution for those who don't want to deal with that kind of thing. And Handbrake is quite good. There are some things you got to get used to, like if you want to resize something or you want to change the codec, you got to be pretty attentive to every time, because it doesn't really save the settings, stuff like that. But it is definitely one of the best options for converting existing videos to like do whatever you want. But yeah, if you do want to check out the scripting ability, FFmpeg is a fantastic option for that.
Very cool.
Yep. And next up in the show for the software spotlight, and that is Remina.
Yeah.
Remina is a really awesome remote desktop client. It's basically, it was started as an RDP software, so you could remote into Windows systems. They added VNC, NX, XD, MCP, and SSH, like all kinds of stuff. So like it's getting more and more beneficial to use it, every release. But our Remina has been around for a very long time, and it's a fantastic option for remoting into a Windows machine, for example. If you don't want to use TeamViewer and you want to use something that's open source, Remina is a great option for that. And there's actually something that's a really interesting way of using Remina that Ryan pointed to me recently. So how do you use Remina?
Well, I normally have been using FileZilla for everything, getting into servers or stuff, or just using the terminal. But Remina, when it came up and I started looking into it, has some really unique features in it that make it a very convenient GUI tool to quickly be able to list your servers out and connect them, including SSHing into servers directly. So you can have, for instance, Linode servers and my DigitalOcean servers. I can have them all set up, all the connections there. I can SSH, and it's going to pull up just the terminal because obviously there's no GUI there. But then if I have, say, Raspberry Pi, where I do have a GUI interface as one of my servers, or one of my other actual servers that have a GUI desktop environment, I can connect to those as well. So it's kind of, in a way, a lot of all-inclusive tool to where you can connect to any type of server and interface with it, even though it's meant for that kind of team viewer like replacement that a lot of people utilize it for there. So I think it's really a really powerful remote desktop client that you can utilize for multiple purposes. They have plugins out there available. They have scripting in there that you can include to send certain server messages or commands to the server each time, kind of like macros that you can set up within it. So there's a lot, even though the initial setup of it is super simple and fast. I mean, I can figure out how to use it in seconds. There's a lot of advanced features also behind the scenes that you can add into it to make it even more useful.
Very nice. I mean, I tried out the way you're doing it, like doing the managing of the files with SSH, and it is a very nice way of doing it where I don't have to remember the password or the passphrase to make sure that I get into the server. That's awesome. But I'm still kind of lazy, and I just want to drag and drop the file with the SFTP client and stuff.
So FileZilla is still the thing.
So yeah, because I can use SSH with FileZilla. If that wasn't an option, I would totally consider something else. But anyway, so that's it for this show, and thank you for watching episode 92 of Destination Linux.
As always, a big thank you to each and every one of you for supporting us, for watching, for listening, and for really just constantly giving us that support. It allows us to get awesome content in here, like the Daniel Foré interview that we got, and having Gabe here from TechPills on our show to fill in is another awesome perk of you guys supporting this channel and showing it all the love, because we can bring in talent like that at a moment's notice. So thank you so much for joining us for that as well, and thank you all for your support.
Oh yeah,
my pleasure, guys.
Yeah, and especially thanks again, Gab, for joining, and also be sure to keep those emails coming. The emails we get every week is just really awesome to read, and we do read every single one of them, even if we can't put them in each episode. We do appreciate absolutely any of them that you can send. They are very interesting to read, and we thank you for that. If you want to keep continuing to do so, you can send an email to his comments at destinationlinux.org. And you can also contact us by going to destinationlinux.org/contact, where you'll find links to our Mastodon accounts, Discord, Telegram, things like that.
Even Google Plus.
Technically, there is a Google Plus thing.
Not for long.
Yeah, not for long. Well, we'll see. But anyway, you just keep those comments coming. And if you have any questions, feel free to send them to our way, however you want to do it. And also be sure to smash that like button.
Yeah.
And, if you would like to join us for the live experience of this show, you can do so by going to destinationlinux.org/Patreon. And we'd also appreciate if you were to use those social media networks to share the show and let everybody know, as well as rate the podcast on your review or whatever podcast app you use as well. So anyway, with that's it for episode 92. And everybody have a great week. And remember, the journey itself is just as important as the destination.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.